for coming. Thank you for coming. Before we begin, just want to remind everybody about what I mentioned on Shabbos about the Ma'os Chitim. There's a very strong minhag to be supportive of those who are in need of support so that they can have their supplies necessary, matzah, wine, etc. for Pesach. Whether there are needy people in our own community or in the local South Florida community or of course in Israel, any contributions would be greatly appreciated. There is a little donation box over here which we're not going to pass around if anybody wants to put in small change. If you'd like to make a larger donation, you can please deliver a check. You can either make it out to the shul or make it out to the Ma'os Chitim fund, whatever, and you'll give it to Marvin Diamond when you get to, of course, the sooner the better. And this way they can be distributed in advance of Pesach to those who are in need, and thank you very much. Tonight what we're going to be doing in this pre-Pesach halacha review class is essentially go through the outline. Some sections will be done a little faster, some will be a little more detailed, owing to the nature of their specific topic. And of course at the top of the page is my cell phone number and my email address, so that if you have questions in advance of Pesach, please feel free to be in touch in either method. The better one is email, but I take phone calls too, and that will be fine. Okay, so the main point here tonight is not to get into the laws of what it means to have kosher Pesach food. I think everybody understands that. How to run a seder, that's not what tonight is about. I think we have scheduled to do a different pre-Pesach class in 2 weeks from now, and I'll have to see if we're going to do it. It may be more focused on the seder in the evening in that sense. But the reason why I'm doing this now is because last year when I gave this class, I think it was about 5 days before Pesach, and people said, oh my goodness, if we had only known this 3 weeks before Pesach, that would have been appreciated. So that's why we're doing this now, 3 weeks before Pesach, so that that complaint will be nipped in the bud. Okay, so that is our goal. That is one goal for the evening. Okay, so the first thing is B'dikas Chametz responsibilities. Of course, in section 2, we're going to get rid of going to go through the laws of what it means to not have chametz in your home on Pesach. But the first piece of that really starts on the evening before the Seder, which is the 14th of Nisan, when it is dark, and that is when we do this. So the one question that comes up a lot here, some people will not be here for Pesach, or some people are still coming for Pesach, and maybe they'll watch this on the video, and that is the question of what to do if you're traveling. So since at this stage of the game, we're all within 30 days before Pesach, that's really the determination point in terms of whether you're going to be doing B'dikas Chametz somewhere. So for example, if you left your house elsewhere, and now you're here, and you left your house more than a month before Pesach, you didn't have to do B'dikas Chametz. You close up your house, you're going to sell the Chametz that's in your house, so you're covered in that respect. But if it's within 30 days, let's say you're here now and you're going to be going somewhere else for Pesach, so before you leave, if it's not the regular night for B'dikas Chametz, you do B'dikas Chametz without a bracha, the way that you normally do it, ideally at night, because that's the right time to do B'dikas Chametz, but if you don't remember and you do it in the daytime beforehand, that's okay too. Use either a candle or a flashlight, just something that can help you check in corners. That's the way you do B'dikas Chametz in advance if you're going to be traveling. And if you own 2 homes as well, again, the 30-day before Pesach is the litmus test. So if you're here now and you're going to be going somewhere else before Pesach, then you have to do B'dikas Chametz in both places. But if you're already been gone from the other home and you're here now, you didn't have to do B'dikas Chametz there. Now, wherever you are, the night of the 14th of Nisan, you have to do B'dikas Chametz, assuming that you're in the right place for Pesach. The only exception would be if you are giving away your house, for example, and the people who are coming they have access to the house before that time. I don't know why you're still there the night before Pesach, but if that would be the only exception. But otherwise, you really should be doing B'dikas Chametz wherever you are, unless this is the exception, unless you got to the house that you're taking from somebody else, and they already did bedikas chametz, and you're not bringing any chametz in. That would be the real exception. But even so, you should do a cursory bedikas chametz because that is the proper thing to do on the evening. That's what the Mishnah tells us in Pesachim, that we do bedikas chametz the night before the Seder. A recommendation for hiding chametz pieces. The Shulchan Aruch talks about what happens if there's a custom to hide 10 pieces of bread. So the Shulchan Aruch addresses what happens if you hit 10 and after you do bedikas chametz you find you only have whatever it is, a number less than 10, so you have a problem. So the recommendation is to hide kitnios. Kitnios is chametz. In the event that somebody forgets where they hid their item, so you forget, not such a big deal. Whereas if you don't find your chametz, you have a problem owing to the next point number, section 2 in this list. So that is a recommendation for hiding chametz pieces. Of course, if you're Sephardic, it doesn't help you at all, since you can eat kitnios on Pesach. But for those of us who don't eat kitnios on Pesach, that is a good recommendation. Next, if your home will be occupied by someone else for Pesach, so again, it depends on what the arrangement is. If they have access to the home before the bedikas chametz evening, you could tell them you'll do bedikas chametz. In either case, I'm sure that if you're renting out your house to somebody or giving your house to somebody, of course you're going to be cleaning it before they get there. So whatever bedikas chametz they're going to be doing is going to be relatively easy anyway. But they should be going through the process of bedikas chametz on the evening of the 14th in that type of situation. Since somebody else is going to be there and they're going to be doing bedikas chametz in the house, then you wouldn't be required to do bedikas chametz in your own house, but wherever you are for Pesach, the night of the 14th, you would do bedikas chametz. Even if you're on a cruise, even if you're in a hotel, you do bedikas chametz in your own little space, your hotel room, your ship, whatever it's called, cabin. You would do bedikas chametz in that place. Even if you haven't even brought chametz there, you should be doing bedikas chametz at that time with a bracha. And the summary, I wrote an article about this. You can see the date. It was 2 years ago, which I put on my blog, and all of these rules are summarized there. Okay, the next section is getting rid of chametz. So we have in the Torah, gives us a mitzvah that we have tashbisu su'or mibatechem, that over the period of Pesach you have to eradicate the chametz from your house. Chametz is defined, which is chametz is defined in section 4, but I can skip to it now because it's important to know. Anything which has one of the 5 grains in it, but except that, from the time that you mix but from the time that the ingredients of those 5 grains were mixed with liquid, so it took more than 18 minutes for the process of the cooking or baking, whatever it was, to finish. That's what essentially is defined as chametz. Obviously, matzah has flour in it, wheat flour usually, or whatever flour it has in it. There are different kinds of matzah, but the process of the baking and anything which is kosher l'Pesach, the process of the baking is finished within 18 minutes. So it's not considered to be chametz because the dough hasn't risen. But when it comes to chametz, we have a mitzvah of tashbisu, which is to get rid of it, and we also have a mitzvah of bal yirah or bal yimatzeh, which means that you shouldn't be able to see it and it shouldn't be found. So on account of that, there are different ways in which people go about doing this. So number one is to get rid of the chametz in your house. And in a sense, that's really the best way to do it. To know what your chametz is, and at this point in time, 3 weeks before Pesach, to not really be buying any more chametz unless it's absolutely necessary, such as if you purchase challah for Shabbos, or if you make challah for Shabbos, just to be slowly getting rid of the flour, getting rid of the pasta, getting rid of whatever it is that's chametz in your pantry. That is the best way to do tashbisu, to the point that you're even that you don't have anything left. That is the best way to do it. Of course, if that doesn't happen, I certainly would not, see, if there's a huge sale in Publix or in whatever supermarket. Oh, look, hamburger buns. This is a great deal. It's never coming back. I wouldn't stock up on the hamburger buns before Pesach. That is not the right way to do tashbisu. Tashbisu means to purge, not to add and then sell it with your chametz. It's better not to do that. Bal yirah, bal yimatzeh means that you shouldn't see it, you shouldn't find it. and it shouldn't belong to you. This is the reason why, when it comes to the selling of chametz, which we're going to get to in a minute, it should be in a pantry which is closed, even though it's not really yours, because the sale is considered to be final in the sense that the non-Jew owns it. But you really shouldn't see it, even though it doesn't belong to you, and that's why we close off the pantries. We label them and say, "Don't open. This is chametz. It shouldn't be in our household." And of course, any chametz which you own, I mean, even before Pesach, we say the declaration of Kol Chamir V'Chamiyah, we declare every chametz that is in our possession to be void and nullified. It's like the dust of the earth, but it still shouldn't be seen. To the point that if you should happen to come across chametz in your house on Pesach, guess what? You don't own it. You're in the clear in terms of owning it because of the declarations which you made before Pesach. But the law is very clear that if you find chametz in your house on Pesach, get rid of it. Just throw it out. If it's something which you could throw into the wind, you throw it into the wind. Nowadays, I would just say put it in the garbage can and put it in the bin outside. And there, it's like hefker. It doesn't belong to you. It's not seen. It's not visible. That's how you get rid of chametz in the event that you find it during Pesach. And by the way, the same rule applies if you find the chametz after Pesach. Chametz that you didn't know about, you find it in a drawer, you stuck a chametz stick of candy in a drawer by accident once, you left it in a pair of pants, which you hung up and you haven't worn in 6 months, and then you find it one day. Okay, so you have to get rid of that. There is a view in the Shulchan Aruch that says if you find it on Yantiv, so it may be muksa, you put an overturned bowl over it so nobody touches it, nobody sees it, and then after Yantiv is over, you get rid of it in the fashion in which I described. Getting to the next topic, which is the selling of chametz. So you'll see that indeed I mentioned the OU magazine. So this is the OU magazine. There are a few copies online. Outside. Maybe we'll get more. I don't know. But in either case, it's online. It's on the internet. I gave you the link at the very back where you could find it, and as well as the CRC. The CRC, which is a kosher organization, kashrus organization based in Chicago, they also have a great Pesach book, and they're both available online. I think for the OU one, you have to give your email address.
There are more under the table.
What?
Under the table, there are more.
Under the table there are more. Okay, so that's good. Thank you. But in any case, they're available. So when it comes to the issue of selling chametz, so the OU put in a list here on pages 15 and 17. Yeah, I mean, what constitutes chametz is really separate, but in terms of selling chametz, it's 15 and 17. So they tell you essentially what is the chametz that you need to look out for versus what is not chametz and you don't need to look out for, and you don't need to close it off in your pantry in the event that it's not chametz. So it's a good idea to have a separate pantry for Pesach so that when you're closing off your pantry, which does have chametz items in it, you're not selling the things which you don't need to sell. So there is that list there on pages 15 and 17. And the main thing that I would say, again, getting in line with what I mentioned before, if you're talking about bread or a box of pasta, unless you're talking about a lot of it. So if we're dealing with something which is a tremendous loss of money, you have hundreds of dollars worth of items in your pantry, then sell it, of course. If you have lots of bottles of liquor, which is expensive, then sell it, of course. But if you're dealing with $10 worth of items, you're better off, this is my view, obviously you can sell it, you can do that as well, and that's fine. But if you can fulfill the mitzvah of tashbisu, which is to get it out of your house, that is, I think that's ideal, to not have to sell your chametz. Really, you have to think about what selling chametz is, and there's a history about it. I gave you a link in D3, 2D3, has a history of selling chametz. So it's really meant to cover people who were not able to fulfill the mitzvah of tashbisu. But ideally, we should be getting rid of our chametz completely so that we don't need to sell it unless we're dealing with something which is a hefsed meruba, a tremendous loss of money. Okay, right. So I wrote here, we're not there to sort out. So we don't have to start going through which of our chametz I'm going to keep. I'm not going to, so if you're going to sell it, you're selling everything. But the idea of getting rid of chametz ideally is purging the things which are not expensive and don't need to be in the house. Okay, when it comes to section 3, which is kitnios. Now the topic of kitnios could be a lecture in and of itself. Kitnios is essentially things from which flour, which could be confused with wheat flour, could be made, and on the one hand, and it's also a larger definition of legume and bean type of legumes. Okay, I was about to say vegetables. So what essentially constitutes in it. I mean, you can find a list. There are so many things which have been put into the list of kitnios. I mean, the most classic ones that we know of are of course beans and any legumes. Rice is considered to be kitnios in that sense because there's rice flour, which can be confused with wheat flour. There is an interesting debate amongst later authorities about corn. Most people accept that corn is kitnios, though there are those who say that it's a later found item, so it shouldn't be part of the gezerah of kitnios, the decree about kitnios, because the decree of kitnios was made 700 or 800 years ago, and nobody knew about corn 700 or 800 years ago, despite what you hear about Yosef in Egypt and all the translations of what they were farming. It's pretty clear that it probably wasn't corn, and corn was not considered to have been part of the gezerah of kitnios. In any case, kitnios is not chametz. Chametz is defined, as I mentioned before, by the 5 grains. So if you have, for example, a stash of beans in your house, you don't need to sell the stash of beans in your house because they're not chametz. They can sit in your pantry, you can see them, they're not chametz. We just have a custom, and it's a very strong custom, not to eat them, but they are not chametz. And therefore it does not need to be sold. What the custom is and what the custom is not, the custom is to not eat the kitnios, but you have to understand as well that nowadays, there's a whole big movement, especially in the land of Israel, because a lot of people, I don't know the percentages, but a very large percentage of people come from Middle Eastern lands in Israel, and because they come from Middle Eastern lands, and the decree about kitnios was not ever binding on them because it was never accepted in the Middle Eastern Jewish communities. So there is a whole group of foodstuffs in Israel which have kitnios as a significant ingredient because it's not prohibited as in other words, there's no custom for a large percentage of the population to not eat it. And so many people who have moved, especially those who have moved to Israel, were so very strict about, from the Ashkenazi community, and who are so very strict about not eating kitnios, are finding that a lot of foodstuffs which are kosher for Passover have a lot of kitnios in it. So there have been so many articles written over the last few years about either allowing people to eat kitnios on Pesach or to start talking about, okay, let's look at percentages. And once we're talking about percentages, there are different viewpoints as to what is considered to be bittul. Bittul meaning that it is considered nullified from a halachic sense. So the more stringent view, for example, of bittul is 1 in 60th. You need to have less than 1/60th or 1/60th or less of the forbidden item versus 59 times, I guess, of the permitted item, and then it's considered halachically as if it's not there. This is a classic example, like if a drop of milk falls into a chicken soup, so your chicken soup is going to be fine because it's 1 drop compared to with a whole bunch of chicken soup. So that's what bittul means. So when it comes to kitnios, the argument is made that a lot of that the ingredient of kitnios, if it's not like the first thing, high fructose corn syrup, which is an interesting discussion anyway as to if that's really kitnios, but most authorities say that it is, and that's why Coca-Cola, for example, changes its main sweetener from high fructose corn syrup to sugar during the Pesach season. So that is a discussion which is going on now, and of course, if there is an item which has a little bit of kitnios in it, by and large, there is a very reliable chance that it is 1 in 60th, again, unless it's the first ingredient on the food in question. If it's a later ingredient, and you can rely, in all likelihood, that halachically speaking, the kitnios is not there. Again, even if you eat it, it's not chametz. You're not violating a Torah prohibition. You're violating a very strong minhag. I don't even think it's a rabbinic prohibition. It's a very strong minhag. And that is what it's all about. So some people asked me, for example, last year about like a flavored seltzer. So it doesn't have a Passover certification on it. Okay, but in all likelihood, if you look at the ingredients, it's all chemicals anyway. So, but if there, in the event that there is a trace of kitnios in there, it's probably batel on account of the fact that most of the seltzer is water. Right? That's what seltzer is. So I think that you can probably rely on that when it comes to getting a flavored seltzer. I'm sure there are people who will disagree, and that is, and I'll hang my hat on that one if it's the worst sin that we do. But I don't believe that there's chametz in the flavored seltzer. Okay, what constitutes chametz? So I mentioned before, it's in the OU magazine, 5 grains. So the number 1, it has to come from the 5 grains. Number 2, it has to be edible. And edible means, by the definition of edible to a dog, if a dog won't eat it, then it's not considered to be food, and therefore it is not considered to be chametz. There are different viewpoints as to whether you can have it in your house or whether you can't have it in your house. However, if you look in the OU magazine on page 102, and I mentioned this in section 5, what is not chametz. So the OU finally came around to the statement that the CRC made many years ago, and now they're saying the consensus of the OU's poskim, the rabbinic authorities, is that the following may be used on Passover without certification. And they give a whole bunch of things. The only question that they raise here is oral hygiene, like toothpaste and mouthwash, and lip treatment, because these are things which go into the mouth and which people sometimes swallow. But other things such as perfumes and deodorants and insecticides and detergents, dishwashing soap, carpet cleaners, charcoal, these are things which are not food. So even if they have chametz in it, it's not chametz because it's out of the realm of being edible. Even a dog wouldn't eat these things, and if even a dog wouldn't eat it, it's not considered to be chametz, and you can have it in your house, and you can even use it. I gave you an example in shul last week, I think, that sometimes a child will make a macaroni necklace, right? It's not food anymore because it's usually covered with shellac or some type of paint. Anybody who's going to eat that, well, nobody's going to eat that, and so therefore it's not considered to be food, and so it's not considered to be chametz. Could you be machmir and get rid of it? I don't think you want that around the house anyway. That's a different discussion, because you don't want somebody to come across and possibly say, "Oh, look, there's macaroni here. Let's cook this." But that's a different discussion. Okay, when it comes to ta'arovas chametz. Ta'arovas chametz is any type of food that has a mixture of some kind of chametz, in which certainly where the chametz ingredient is more than 1/60th. So there you have a problem, and since it's food, you would have to get rid of it. So I mean, just as an extreme example, I've been talking to shul. I mentioned yesterday or the day before about or today I think actually about using a grill, for example. So if you only put straight meat or straight chicken on the grill, so there's no chametz in there, and if that's the only thing you put on your grill, then it's not. Then your grill is a chametz stick, and you wouldn't have. I don't think you have to kasher it. I mean, you can kasher it, and I think as a disclaimer for all the things that I'm going to be saying about that you don't have to kasher versus what you do have to kasher, please bear in mind. I don't want to change anybody's method. If you are strict about a bunch of things because that's what you've always done, continue to do that by all means. I'm going to be showing you perspectives that may demonstrate you don't have to drive yourself crazy in the event that it drives you crazy. But if you like to drive yourself crazy, so go ahead and do that. I don't want to bust that bubble. And if it makes you comfortable in preparing for Pesach that way, so that is fine. But getting back to the point about the grills, sometimes, for example, ground beef, when it's mixed together with in order to make a hamburger, may have a chametz ingredient in it. Sometimes people put flour in there. And I thank Howie for pointing this out to me, that sometimes there is chametz in meat. And if that's the case, then of course your grill would need to be kasher. And the way to do that, we're going to get into in a few minutes when we talk about kasher. Okay. Now I have a star here that says "See Aruch HaShulchan" below. So let's turn over the page for a second. And the source on the left, that's in Hebrew, says the following. I don't want to read through the whole thing. I just want to get to the point which is in bold. The Kosav HaMordechai. Now the Mordechai is no slouch. He is one of the classic commentaries on the Talmud. He says, "B'Perek Kol Shad, B'chol Makom sheyesh below zeh tzad lahatir, af al pi she'anu osrim v'mashu mikol makom v'chai gavna somchen al devreim lahatir b'samach." Okay, he says that yes, it's certainly the truth that b'chol makom sheyesh below zeh tzad lahatir, af al pi she'anu osrim. He says if there is room to be lenient because of the concept of bitul, even though we are generally machmir, afal pi she'anu osrin b'mashu, even though we forbid chametz on Pesach b'mashu with the slightest amount, one tiny crumb of chametz is forbidden on Pesach. Okay, if you have a pot of soup and a crumb of chametz falls into your pot of soup, guess what happens to that pot of soup? Can't eat it on Pesach. The concept of bitul, of cancellation, nullification, of it being absorbed, of it being non-existent, does not apply on Pesach. That crumb will cancel, will prohibit and make that entire pot of soup forbidden. It says even though we have such a rule, so in the example that he's talking about, and he's talking about before Pesach, okay, so he says in extreme circumstances we allow for bittul to take place before Pesach. Okay, I'm going to explain what that means in a minute. Obviously, I'm not recommending this, and I'm not recommending it. You want to make sure that your house is purged of chametz. You don't want to come into any questions. You don't want to have any problems with this. But the point that the Aruch HaShulchan is raising is that there is a viewpoint, again, not on Pesach, but before Pesach, that a piece of chametz can be nullified if we absolutely need to. Okay, and I'm going to explain how that applies, actually, how that's relevant to us when we get to the section in terms of food for purchase. Okay, I'm up to now 4D. What constitutes chametz asur b'ma'asher on Pesach? So I just mentioned that a moment ago, but just want to repeat the point. On Pesach itself, the slightest bit of chametz, even a crumb, is forbidden because seor lo yimatzeh b'vatechem. You can't have any chametz in your house on Pesach in your possession or eat on Pesach. That is something which we are very strict about, and the rules of bittul, nullification, do not apply. What is not chametz? So I mentioned this before. I mentioned page 102 in the OU magazine, which lists a bunch of things which are not food and therefore not chametz. The OU magazine also has on pages 64 to 71, they have here OU certified products that do not require OUP. Okay, that means that they're not chametz, and therefore, if there isn't a special Pesach designation on them, you can still get them. And they list all these things that have OU certification, including baking soda, cleaners and detergents, many types of coffee, detergent, which they already declared didn't need it anyway, but juice concentrates, egg products, olive oil, nuts, meat and poultry, bottled water, right? Just in case you had a concern about that. The paper, plastic wraps, foil, and candles, which you might be eating on Pesach, those things as well. Personal and oral hygiene, tea bags, white sugar, granulated only, salt, brown sugar, tea bags. I mentioned vegetables, and I mentioned as well, but a very large list of bottled water, which does not require certification. I know that's throwing everybody for a loop. That bottled water doesn't require Pesach certification, but yes, anyway, it does not require Pesach certification or any certification. And anyway, so that is good to know. Okay. So now when I mention on here, buy it now, the reason is because, especially in kosher supermarkets in advance of Pesach, they'll take anything which is kosher Pesach and they're going to jack up the price. So you buy it now, since it sits on your shelf anyway, and it doesn't require kosher for Passover certification, so that is a good idea and that is advisable. When it comes to food for purchase, so the same thing would apply. Sorry, see section VB, 5B, which is what I just mentioned. The same thing applies when it comes to items that you could buy in advance. Anything that can be bought in advance, meaning not the week of Pesach, when the prices go up, is advisable. Now, when it comes to dairy products, so this is interesting. As long as I'm not misunderstanding what I heard from Rabbi Tendler a long time ago, then this is how it works. I mentioned this in Shul a little over a week ago, but it is recommended to buy a dairy product which does not require kosher for Passover certification. For example, milk. Okay, in this country, which is considered kosher, we had Rabbi Goldberg from Fort Lee who came here and talked about Moshe Feinstein's tshuvos about milk and how milk in this country is deemed kosher simply because government regulation says it's from cows, and so therefore it is not only kosher, but in Rav Moshe's too, it's as if it's chalav Yisrael. So dairy products, because of the way things are manufactured and because just of what's going on, where sometimes the animal feed could theoretically be chametz and it could somehow mix in with the milk and the processing. So by the time it comes out of whatever machinery and gets into the containers, so what do you have there? You have milk. Do you have any pieces of grain in there? Has anybody ever found a piece of grain in a milk carton? Anybody? I don't think so. Okay, so it's clearly that, but there may be a vestige of a blia, in other words, an absorbed flavor or a taste of something in there. Now, of course, it would be it's basically nothing. But if you own it before Pesach, so before Pesach, and following what the Aruch HaShulchan that we saw before said, bittul applies. It is nullified. You're talking about a smidgen of a taste which counts for nothing in the dairy, and if that's the case, if you own it before Pesach, it is considered nullified and it doesn't exist. If it were a piece of chametz, different story. You cannot have a piece of chametz. But we're talking about something which may have come out, which you can't see, and it doesn't really exist to the eye, but maybe it exists in a halachic sense. So if you own it before Pesach, it is considered nullified, and therefore you can buy. If you buy that before Pesach, you can use that product on Pesach. If it's on Pesach that you're getting it, then I would recommend you get something that has a Pesach designation, because presumably the reason why it has a Pesach designation is because they were more strict and more careful about it, and therefore it has that Pesach designation. So that would probably apply certainly to milk. I'm assuming to yogurts as well. Different cheeses may have, and yogurt. Again, anything other than milk which has a dairy product. I mean, I would recommend getting the kosher for Passover designation because I don't know what goes into the processing.
Butter?
So what?
Butter as well?
So I don't think that butter needs a Passover certification. Okay, unless I'm crazy, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I don't think it does. Okay, it's because the main ingredient. What's in butter? Milk and salt. Right? I think that's all. Or possibly no salt.
Which if you buy things like the milk, the butter, and cheese before Passover, as long as it has an OU on it, not the milk though.
Yeah.
Cheese is up there. You don't need like an OU on cottage cheese if you buy it before Passover.
So I'm going to recommend you get the kosher for Passover one. You get the kosher for Passover one, but I mean only because I don't know what's in the processing. Okay, but sometimes they use enzymes. I don't know what the enzymes are. I don't know whatever the additives are. Sometimes you have fermenting agents which might be chametz. So if that's the case, it's recommended to do that. But milk is straight, and therefore I would say you can certainly buy the milk before. Yeah.
They also said that about eggs, right? Buy them ahead of time.
Right, but the egg would be the exact same thing, because if there's a vestige or a remnant in the egg, somehow chametz from the chicken ate, then the same thing would apply. I don't know what chametz the chicken's eating, probably kidneys, but maybe they eat meat, I don't know. Okay, moving on, straight meat, same thing, straight meat. I'm not talking about hamburgers, which may have something in it. If you're talking about steak, roast, chicken, it's not chametz steak. You buy it before Pesach, before they throw that price up. Buy it now, put it in your freezer. That's how you save a little bit of money in advance of Pesach. Or just buy from Costco because they don't know about Pesach gouging. So there you go. Right, it's true.
It's true.
By the way, after Rosh Hashanah last year, when they thought the Jews were no longer buying chicken, I think chicken was down to, if I'm not mistaken, like $1.19 a
At
pound.
Costco, yeah.
We bought like 40 packages. It was amazing. Costco. Okay.
It's true.
All right, next, things which have minimal vestige of super processed kitnios, probably batel and okay. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi for specifics. Okay, so I kind of mentioned that before about something which would have a minimal vestige. And again, super processed kitnios, that's what I'm talking about. I know that obviously no kosher certification, no kosher organization is going to allow high fructose corn syrup. But there are those who argue that high fructose corn syrup is so far removed from corn because of the process that it goes through, that maybe we should say it's not really kitnios. Of course, again, a kashrus organization is not going to do that. They're going to say it has the word corn in it, it's kitnios. But between the fact that it's not really corn anymore and the possibility that corn isn't even kitnios, owing to the fact that it wasn't part of the decree about Pesach, so if it's so far removed from being corn syrup and it's such a small amount in it, then I would follow along the lines of the rabbis in Israel who are saying, just it's fine. Okay, if it's one third is the more lenient method of bittul, 1/3 against 2/3, and since it's never going to be that much, I shouldn't say never, but in most cases it's not going to be that much, then you don't have to drive yourself crazy for something which has a kitnios derivative. Quinoa. So rabbis in the past have gone back and forth. I've eaten quinoa on many a Pesach. Enjoy. Now the only thing is, some say the reason why they would not recommend quinoa unless it has Passover certification on it is because there may be wheat grains in it, which is the same reason why we don't eat rice, because there may be wheat grains in it. So if you want to search your quinoa and go through it, but in and of itself it's not considered to be chametz. Some want to throw it into the box with kitnios, but I mean they've allowed it enough times that's not really fair to do that. After you say quinoa is not part of the gzeira, because again, it was only recently discovered grain. It was in some far off place with no Jew. Not a grain. It's not a grain. Okay. What?
It's a berry.
Okay, it's a berry. There we go. It's a berry. Very good. Okay. Okay, section 7. Matzah, machine made or handmade? So that could be a shear in and of itself. The answer is, it's all good. Now, if I said that 150 years ago, I would be strung up on my fingernails by certain rabbis in Eastern Europe, okay, and in Western Europe. Okay, there was a big debate, which we're not going to get into now. If it has a kosher certification on it that says that it's shmura, for sure it's fine. Even kosher Pesach is good enough, and that is the case. I would recommend anybody for the Seder specifically, to use matzah that has a designation of shmura on it, whether handmade or machine made. Shmura for the Seder, because the mitzvah of eating matzah is for the evening of the Seder, and the mitzvah, and of course the Torah says, "Ushmartem es hamatzos," Ushmartem es hamatzos, that it needs to be an extra higher level of guarding. Of course, any matzah that you're eating on Pesach, that's kosher Pesach, is shmura in one way. Shmura means guarded. That means that it was guarded from having the flour come in contact with water before the baking process began. But there are different levels of shmura. What they call shmura matzah means that it was guarded from the time that they harvested, before they even turned it into flour, that the grain didn't come in contact with water. But the other, like the plain Manischewitz kosher Pesach matzah, for example, is shmura from the time that they turned it into flour, that the flour never came in contact with water. So it's different levels. But it's all, obviously it's all kosher Pesach. It's just a question of what you personally want to do for yourself. But again, recommended that what's labeled shmura is, that's the higher level of matzah that has been, that where the grains were guarded from the time of the harvesting, and that is recommended for the Seder, yeah.
How about the 18-minute matzahs? What category is that?
So I don't know enough about 18-minute matzahs, but again, it just boils down to, is it designated as shmura or is it not designated as shmura? If it says kosher Pesach on it, and it says shmura, and the certification and the certifying agency is one that you trust, then, enjoy. Okay, koshering items, how to. OU Magazine, pages 24 to 27. Okay, so in here, okay, Richard, I'm going to ask you to do it now. Okay. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
What about steaming?
About using a steamer to kosher things. So there are different viewpoints. Some people say that the steamer, if it's hot enough, if it's boiling hot, that's good enough. I don't know that it is. If you could do boiling water and not make a mess, I mean, you're going to make a mess with boiling water. It's just,
I wouldn't touch it.
right. I know you wouldn't touch it, but again, iroi, to my understanding, is pouring boiling water. That's what I understand. I know that some people do that, so it really depends on what surface we're talking about. Yeah.
Some things they call steamers are not really generating steam, it's really just an atomizer, it's cold steam.
Okay, so then if that's the case, that's a boiling water. It's boiling water. Okay, and you don't have any questions about that. All right, now when it comes to countertops, so this is what I said last year, and I know what they're going to say in this. They have to remember the kashrus organizations that in some cases they try to be helpful, and in some cases they're I'm going to be as strict as I can be so that nobody's going to call me into question. So when it comes to countertops, it really boils down to how you run your kitchen. If you're covering your countertop, you don't have any questions. You're covering your countertop and fine. No matter what you're doing, you have to clean your countertop anyway. There shouldn't be any smidgen of anything left behind. And so when it comes to countertops, the question is, do you ever put anything which is boiling hot on the countertop? And if the answer is you sometimes put a pot there, what's under the pot when you put it on the countertop? If there's nothing, then your countertop is probably not chametzik. Okay, the fact that we kasher things, it's just because that's the way we've always done it. And if that's the way you do it, great. I'm not telling you not to do that. But as far as, you have to know how you operate in your kitchen. If you're putting boiling hot chametz on your countertop, or if you know that boiling hot chametz sometimes gets on your countertop, then your countertop needs to be covered. If you never get boiling hot chametz on your countertop ever, then your countertop probably doesn't need to be covered, it just needs to be cleaned. We saw in the Shulchan Aruch and in the Ramah this week here in Shul, after davening or between Mincha Marav, how if there's a vessel that you use all year, not for sourdough and not for a sharp item such as horseradish, but just for, like, you store crackers in it, cold crackers that you bought from the store, as long as you clean it out, you don't need to kosher it. If there's nothing, if you never put anything that's warm in it, you can use it for Pesach without having to kosher anything, as long as it's clean. If it has cracks in it, different story, because the chametz can get into those cracks and it may be hard to get out. But if it's a non-porous surface and there's no way that there's anything in it, and you see from looking at it that it is totally clean and there's no chametz in it, and you always use it for cold, it doesn't need to be kosher. This is straight in the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, and I'm not making that up. And that is a good way to go. We talked about this week as well. If you have cups which never get any chametz in it, or even if they get like a cold soda in it, and the cold soda doesn't have chametz in it, it has kitnios in it, you don't need to change your cups. You don't. Now, somebody asked me, what if I put it in the dishwasher? I say the same thing. You don't have to. I don't think you have to change your cups for Pesach. What about koshering a dishwasher? So the OU said a few years ago, you can kosher your dishwasher, run an empty cycle, you don't need new racks. End of story. Don't ask me any questions about that. That's what they said. Yes, you can kosher your dishwasher, you don't need extra racks, and run an empty cycle with soap. There you go. If you want to wait, in general, when you're going to kosher something, wait 24 hours before, don't use it for 24 hours and then do that, and there you go. Okay. No, you wait 24 hours, not using it, and then you do the koshering. Okay, so just leave it empty and then, yes. Okay, great. So clean out the food traps, or don't. Okay. All right. Last couple of things, not halacha, but nice to know for the kitchen. On the OU magazine, they have on pages 51 to 53 substitutions. So, which means that you can use your non-kosher Pesach recipes using the substitutions which they have here. I don't mean that as a joke; it's true. They tell you what to use instead of flour. They tell you what to use instead of other items, which may be chametz stick, and how to go ahead and doing that. Some of these things are amazing. 1 cup sweetened condensed milk. Get this. Equals 1 cup of brown sugar, 2 eggs, 2 tablespoons of potato starch, half a tablespoon of baking powder, and a half a teaspoon of salt. You might just do well to find sweetened condensed milk, which is kosher Pesach. But I don't know that you will. Okay. Find a different recipe. Additional sources. So I didn't get into this one before. The Aruch HaShulchan, which is 6b. So let's read this, and with this, I'll open the door for questions for just a couple of minutes, and then we'll call it quits. Ein chametz aser b'mashu elo b'Pesach atzmo. Chametz is not forbidden with the smallest amount, as I mentioned before, except for on Pesach itself. Aval lo be'erev Pesach mechatzos ve'elach. But not on Erev Pesach from... hold on a second. No, mechatzos ve'elach is on the next one. Aval lo be'erev Pesach, but not on Erev Pesach. Mechatzos ve'elach, kevan she'ein bo kares, batal b'shishim. So from midday until Yom Tov begins, since it's not yet considered a time when you have kares, meaning your excision from your people for violating the rules of chametz. So in other words, before Pesach begins, it's batel b'shishim. Your chametz is nullified 1 in 60th. The kol shekein in misarev kodam Pesach the batel b'shishim, and even more so if it was mixed with something else, as I mentioned before, with respect to the milk, it is nullified 1 in 60. Keinu askamas kol poskim. That is the agreement of all of the poskim. V'lochein chita shenintzes b'tarnagolos mevushelas be'erev Pesach. If there is a piece of wheat that the chicken ate, okay, in other words, in the chicken, that the chicken ate, which you cook on Erev Pesach, muteres, you can eat the chicken, de betela b'shishim, because that piece of wheat is nullified in advance of Pesach. V'zeu k'shezarko achita mimena, and this only applies when they found the piece of wheat and you threw it out. In other words, whatever remnant is, you don't see the wheat anymore, whatever remnant is nullified. Then but if they for some reason left that piece of wheat in it, and then they see it there on Pesach, then az oser b'mashu. If that piece of wheat is present, then it will cancel out the entire thing. In other words, it will make it forbidden on Pesach. The lo shaykh lamar shekvar nespatla. You can't say when you actually see the item that it was batel, that it was nullified in the ratio of the 1 in 60. We're talking about if they heated it without the piece of wheat present. But if the piece of wheat is present, then you have a complete blia, an absorption, and that would make it forbidden. Okay, so basically he is supporting what I said before in terms of if there's a vestige of it but the item isn't present. If the item is not present and it's before Pesach, then it is nullified. But if the item is still present, then it is not nullified because on Pesach it's asher b'mashu, meaning it's forbidden with the tiniest amount. Okay, I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Of course, there's a lot more to discuss, but at least in terms of kashering, we had an overview, at least in terms of what it means to buy things in advance of Pesach. We had an overview, and of course the other preparations in terms of getting rid of chametz, and what is chametz, what is not chametz, what is kitnios, and how to do b'dikas chametz. These things have been covered. So now I'll take questions, and hopefully I'll be steering you right. Yes, Judy.
So, you use that Pesach?
So the soda stream itself, in other words, to make seltzer, I think is not a problem. I don't know what's in the flavors. So it may be kitnios. Yeah, so I don't think it's a problem. Yeah.
And this one is granite.
Sorry, what?
Caution granite, can you caution granite with boiling water?
So what I would recommend for all this stuff is they tell you which things you can and which things you can't. For the OU, in the OU magazine and in the CRC magazine, they tell you how to kosher what you can and what you can't, and otherwise they tell you to cover. So I don't know all of those details, but they have it outlined in here. I didn't find the page, but it's in here. And if not, I can send you the information that is out there. If you're not comfortable with what I said before about the countertops, which is just to clean it, then if they say you can kosher it, and I think most stoneware, the fancy stoneware you can, with Eroi, pouring the boiling water, then you cover it. That's the way to go. Marvin, yeah.
If we're, like down here, renting, we're borrowing 3 or 4 houses for the family coming down. They're not coming down until Thursday night or Friday morning. Do we do Bedika in all the houses? Or who does it? Do our kids coming down do it? Do we do it? With a bracha, without?
Okay, so if it's on the, so it depends on, I mean, you have to find out from the people who own the house when they left and if they did B'dikas Chametz. If they did B'dikas Chametz, you can rely on that. Especially if nobody's in the house the night of the 14th, okay, in which case you're relying on the owner of the house's thing. If not, then when they get there, they should do a cursory B'dika. But again, presumably the house is clean before Pesach. So if you miss doing B'dikas Chametz the night before Pesach, then you do B'dikas Chametz on the day before Pesach. And if you didn't do B'dikas Chametz the day before Pesach, guess what you do? You do B'dikas Chametz on Pesach. That's what the halach says. Okay? Yes? Yes?
The question that I emailed to you was not only in kosher of the glass stovetop, but also its usage on, say, the second day of Pesach. Can it be used or not used?
Yeah, the Shabbos.
Right. So in here, the official answer is. Hold on, it was on here. The modern kitchen. They have it in here, where they claim. I'm trying to find where it is. They essentially say that you can't. I mean that you can. I think they said that you can set it
The Shabbos mode.
at a setting and just leave it there. That's what they recommend because of the electricity they're in. Hold on, I want to see.
I don't recommend changing the setting.
No, they don't recommend changing the setting.
If you have a Shabbos mode one.
They don't recommend changing the setting. Okay?
Yeah, Shabbos mode, it's really a yontif mode.
I don't know how Shabbos mode works with the stovetop or the oven.
Oven.
No, the oven's different. He's asking about the glass top.
Oh,
The glass
that's
top.
we gotta leave it whatever it is.
Okay, so that's what they recommend. Yes, Gary.
I don't know if this applies to all the last. I had an LG, and when it's in Sabbath mode, the cooktop shuts off every 12 hours.
The cooktop shuts off?
Yes.
Okay, well then there's your answer. If the cooktop shuts off, then you can't use it. I mean, then you won't be able to use it. Yeah. If a hot water pot only had water in it, I don't believe that it's chametz, and I think that you can use it on Pesach. Yes.
A hot plate, a hostess tray, not a platter. Use it for Pesach?
Cover it.
Well, what I would recommend you cover it because I don't know what's been on there. You know, if things are spilled or whatnot. I don't think that that it's a good idea to pour boiling water on it. I don't think you'd ruin it. So just cover it. I mean, clean it and cover it. Yes, Debbie.
That was the thing.
Okay, so cleaning a microwave. So what I believe is the recommended practice for cleaning a microwave is clean it really well. Now, I mean, sometimes it's hard because there are cracks and crevices, but you clean it as best as you can. And by the way, just in general, in the event that you do need to kosher something within 24 hours, in other words, you just used it, and now it's Erev Pesach, and you need to use it for chametz, and now you need to use it. So the way that you do that is that when you do the boiling, when you do the cleaning, you use some type of agent which is not safe to eat. Like ammonia, for example, bleach. Okay, you do that in the cleaning. You're doing what's called no sein tam lefgam. You're ruining the flavor that may have been absorbed in there, and then you can kosher it much easier within having used it in a 24-hour period. With a microwave in general, clean it really well. You're probably not going to get to the crevices, so you're going to do beetle on that anyway, and they're not going to get to your food either because if you can't get to it, they can't get out either. And then you kosher it by putting what, the glass?
No, styrofoam cup.
No, you're talking about the glass plate? Yes, I think that the glass plate it just needs to be clean. I mean, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah have a debate about glass plates. I know it's not exact. Is it glass? Is it glass or is it something like Pyrex? It's glass. So according to them, there's no blia. So you clean it, and it doesn't need to be koshered. Excuse me, that's the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah disagrees. But I think that if you clean your microwave plate and it's spotless and you've done everything you need to clean it, you just catch the microwave by putting water in on high for like 10 minutes.
It's all bubbles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any difference if the microwave is induction? Is it a lot of
I don't know. I don't. Did you say convection or induction?
Convection.
Not that it helps, because I don't know.
Clean it the same way.
Okay, so I would say clean it the same way.
Do it the same way.
And just put it on its highest temperature when you put water in it.
Because all the
Yes,
convection
Sarah.
doesn't make it faster, yeah.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I can't hear what she's saying.
The garbage can is still yours, the hummus is still yours. So you have to know when the garbage collector picks up and gets rid of, or is it still yours?
Oh, the garbage, yeah.
Okay, so if I think I'm understanding the question correctly, if you find chametz on Pesach, the garbage can is still yours. So that's why I said put it in the garbage can outside, and have in mind that when you put it in your garbage bin outside, yeah, the garbage bin is yours, but you don't want the garbage isn't yours. You're getting rid of it from your possession, and the garbage can, as far as you're concerned, you don't care if you even own the garbage can. You should never own that garbage can. That garbage can, I'm serious. The garbage can belongs to the city or whoever is in charge of it. You bought it on their behalf, and you're putting their garbage in there for them. I'm very serious when I say that. You don't own your garbage. You don't want your garbage. I mean, you own it maybe when it's in your house, but that's why you get rid of it. Once you find chametz and you put it in the garbage can and you take it out of your house, it's not yours. You don't want it. You're not bringing it back in unless you lost a ring in there. Then you want that piece of garbage. Okay. All right, folks. That's good. Any other questions? You can take privately or contact me otherwise. And good luck. We should all be blessed. Have a chag kosher v'sameach.